Hi guys, I'm Dylan. I'm 16 years old. 2 years ago, I made a huge mistake. Maybe you can learn from my story and you won't end up with regrets like me. Jason is my best friend. We're really close, and he's really important to me. Our parents were neighbors. We played on the same playground. We went to the same primary school. We got into fights with other kids, protected each other, fell off our bikes, got hurt, cried, laughed. We grew up like brothers. We can talk about anything, our family problems, girls we liked, the secrets we never shared with anyone. Sometimes we just sit in silence next to each other because we can understand each other without talking. He is my only real friend in life. Unfortunately, I did something to hurt him badly. It was 2 years ago. Jason told me about a girl he had just met. He was so happy. He told me how beautiful and sweet she was. I think I'm falling for her, he said. So I said, dude, go for it. Just follow your heart. They started dating a few days later. Her name was Hazel. Of course, he wanted to introduce me, his best friend, to his new girlfriend. So we decided to meet at a cafe the next day. When I arrived, neither of them were there. So I sat down to wait for them. The girl at the next table caught my eye. She was so attractive. She was playing with her phone and looking at me every now and then. I couldn't stop looking at her. I thought to myself, how can I meet this girl? Just then, she smiled at me. Was it possible that she liked me as well? I was just about to go meet her when Jason came in. She got up when she saw him. He walked up to her and kissed her. And they came up to me. She said, "Hi, Dylan, I'm Hazel," and wanted to shake my hand. I was so disappointed. Apparently, she was early like I was. She had been looking at me and thinking, could this be Dylan? I felt really bad, but how could I know that she was Jason's girlfriend? We sat down and started chatting. Jason was telling her funny memories about us and she was laughing. I found myself in awe of her laugh. I immediately looked away and tried not to think about her laugh. That day was seriously difficult for me. I was so charmed by her that I dreamt about her. In my dream, we were sitting somewhere high up and watching the sunset together. It was so cliché. There was a light breeze and she was looking at me with her beautiful smile. I don't remember the rest. I was so angry with myself in the morning. How could I have a romantic dream about my best friend's girlfriend? Obviously, I couldn't control my dreams, but I could control what happened in real life. Hazel was Jason's girlfriend, and she was going to stay that way. Jason and Hazel were spending a lot of time together. Sometimes we all hung out together. I didn't really want to be around Hazel because I was in awe of whatever she was doing. Like the way she laughed with her head thrown back or touched your arm while talking, the way her eyebrow rose when she got angry. I liked everything about her, and this made me feel awful. I started dodging them because I didn't want to fall in love with her, but they were getting upset with me for not spending time with them. One night, the door rang. It was Jason. I had never seen him so miserable. He couldn't even talk. "Did something happen to your parents?" I asked anxiously. He tried not to cry. "Hazel and I broke up," he said. I turned my head away and tried to hide the involuntary smile on my face. Yes, unfortunately, I was happy. Apparently, Hazel told him that she wanted to talk. She said that she wasn't having fun like she used to, and that they had had long silences because they had nothing in common to talk about. Jason wasn't expecting this, so he was shocked. He tried to change her mind, but couldn't. I tried to console him, but the days that followed were pretty bad for him. One day, Hazel sent me a text and said that she was really sad. I wanted to reply, but I didn't. She texted again. She wanted to talk face to face. I couldn't possibly do anything behind Jason's back, so I showed him her message. "There's no way I'll meet her," I said. Jason responded in a way that I didn't expect. He got his hopes up. "Please talk to her. Maybe you'll convince her to come back to me," he said. So we met up. She was sadder than I expected. She said she loved Jason, but their relationship wasn't working anymore. She was crying when she said this. As I listened to her speak, I focused on her lips, forgetting that she was talking about Jason. By the time we finished talking, I realized that Hazel had no intention of going back to Jason. I also realized that I was more in love with her than ever. A lot of time had passed since Jason and Hazel's breakup. Hazel and I were texting each other and sometimes meeting up. We were talking about random stuff and we rarely mentioned Jason anymore. If it was up to me, I'd see her every day, but I was trying to control myself. A few months went by like this. I was now obsessed with her. I couldn't even sleep at night. One morning, I woke up screaming, "Enough!" Yes, it was enough. I couldn't live like this anymore. I decided to talk to Hazel no matter what. I drew up my courage and met up with her. She could tell that something was up. "I've liked you since the moment I first saw you. Actually, it's more than that. I fell in love with you," I blurted out suddenly. She was shocked. She raised her eyebrow and I even adored how she did that. She said, "Do you hear yourself? Didn't you think about how hurt Jason would be if he knew you said this? I'm ready to fight with him if necessary." "Doesn't this show you how strong my feelings are?" I said. She looked into my eyes. I thought she was going to say something, but she just left. That night, I felt so helpless. I cried. A few days later, Hazel wanted to meet up. I was going to see her, but I was scared. I was worried that she might have told Jason. Maybe they were both going to confront me, but she was alone when I went to meet her and she hugged me right away. I was so surprised. I hugged her back. She was crying and her lip was trembling. "It's really hard for us to have a normal relationship. Jason will always be between us. We have to be careful about this," she said. I didn't understand what she wanted from me. "You need to talk to Jason. If he says he's okay with it, then we can be together," she said. I couldn't imagine talking to Jason about this, but this was her condition, and I was going to have to do it one way or another. At first, I couldn't find the courage, but Hazel was very clear, so I didn't really have a choice. "I need to talk to you about something important," I said to Jason. I opened up about my feelings for Hazel. I told him that I felt really bad, but that I couldn't help it. And then I let him know about what Hazel and I talked about. He was obviously shocked. "You're joking, right? Are you asking for my permission?" he asked. I looked away. He sprang up. He called me a jerk and punched me. I didn't do anything to defend myself because he was right. He left without another word. I didn't care about losing him or even the punch. The problem was Jason wasn't okay with the whole thing. That meant Hazel's condition hadn't been met. So I had now lost my best friend as well as the girl that I'm in love with. The next morning, I saw a text from Jason when I woke up. "Dude, Hazel and I weren't happy, but maybe you'll be happy with her. Follow your heart," he wrote. I was ashamed, but also happy. I was so proud of my friend, but also sad for him. I met up with Hazel. She got really emotional when I showed her the text. She hugged me and put her head on my shoulder. We didn't mention it again for the rest of the day. I thought the coming days would be like a dream, but they weren't. I started dealing with feelings that I didn't anticipate. Like, if we were holding hands, I would suddenly imagine her holding hands with Jason and I would pull away. For example, when Hazel wanted to go somewhere, I would ask her, "Have you been there with Jason?" If she were to say something romantic, I would think, "Did she say this to Jason too?" She knew what was going on. She kept telling me that Jason was in the past now. But I couldn't really enjoy any of our time together with this stuff constantly on my mind. Jason and I were still hanging out, by the way. We tried to act like nothing had happened, but things were a bit different. Yet, I valued our friendship now more because he had shown me that he put my happiness above his. My relationship with Hazel was unstable because of me. I was so jealous of the past that we couldn't live in the moment. We broke up a few times. I couldn't make it work with or without her. I was afraid of losing her, but I couldn't stop myself. Hazel was a really smart girl. She came up with a new condition to solve our problem. "I don't think you should be friends with Jason. We can't have a healthy relationship like this. If he's out of your life, he won't be between us anymore," she said. She gave me an ultimatum, and she had every right to do it. I didn't even have to think about my answer. I won't stop being friends with Jason. If I have to choose, then I choose my friend. If I were you, I would have done the same thing. You made the right decision for all of us, she said and hugged me. That was the last time we hugged or saw each other. I couldn't tell Jason what had happened. But apparently Hazel did. I found that out from Jason's message. I heard you couldn't go where your heart wanted to. Maybe you should follow your feet instead. Want to play FIFA tonight? After all I've done, I can't really tell you to appreciate the good friends that you have. So let me end my story with a quote. Good friends are like stars. You don't always see them, but you know they're there.
Hi everyone, my name is Debbie. The moral of the story I'm about to tell you is this. Life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. Eric and I have been friends since kindergarten. We always went to the same schools. We'd say hi when we saw each other. Sometimes we'd say, "How's it going?" and chat for a little. In high school, we were in the same class, so I started seeing him every day. But we still didn't talk much beyond just saying, "Hi, how are you?" Once I noticed him staring at me in class. But when I looked at him, he immediately looked away. I didn't think for a second that it may be because he liked me, since he was one of the most popular guys in school. He didn't have a girlfriend, but a lot of girls liked him. As for me, I was definitely one of the losers. One night, something really unexpected happened. I had just gotten out of the shower. As I was drying my hair, I got a message. I looked. "Hi, Debbie, it's Eric." Eric? Did he even have my number? I was so surprised. He must have gotten my number from one of my friends. Why did he text me so late in the evening? We had a math test the next day. Did he want to ask me something about that? "Eric, you can call me if you want. I'm going to bed soon, but I can talk now," I said. He read my message but didn't reply or call. An hour or so passed. It was time to go to sleep, but I was still so curious. I just typed Eric and sent it. Right away, he replied with, "I'm here." "Is there a problem?" I asked. My face got completely red when I read his message. I can't gather my courage. I waited for a bit. "Can you please call me?" I wrote. This time he called. We talked on the phone until dawn. He said he had liked me for a long time, but that he couldn't open up to me because he didn't get any positive signs from me. We became boyfriend and girlfriend that night. I went to school after not getting any sleep and ended up getting a really bad score on my math test. The rest is a Frog Prince story. Except the frog in this story is me. Eric kissed me and made me a princess. Love came when I least expected it, from the person I least expected. The weird part is that we were not very alike. In fact, we couldn't have been more different. We fell more in love as we discovered how different we were. I was so grateful that God had given him to me, and I was sure that we were going to be together for the rest of our lives. Days were going by so fast. It felt like we just got together yesterday, but we were about to celebrate our first anniversary. This whole year, I had been the happiest person in the world. We decided to celebrate by putting a candle on my favorite food instead of a cake. Pizza, of course. Our anniversary happened to fall on a weekend. We were going to meet at the pizza place at 7. Eric didn't call me all day. He's probably busy preparing a surprise for me, I thought, and so I didn't call him either. The pizza place was not far from my house, so I walked there. I thought Eric would arrive before me, but he wasn't there yet. I waited until 7. He still wasn't there. I called. His phone was off. I texted. He didn't reply. I started to get worried. I calmed myself down and decided to wait a little longer. Eric finally came an hour and a half later. He looked really sad. "Did something bad happen?" I asked. He said no. It was the worst night of our whole year together. He wasn't talking at all. I asked him, "What's wrong?" so many times. He just brushed me off. He said he was just having a bad day. But I knew there was something else. I had never seen him like this before. He was sitting across from me, but he wasn't really there. His mind was somewhere else. The next day, Eric didn't come to school. I called him during lunch. His phone was on, but he didn't pick up. He had never done that before. He never left me in the dark. I called him every hour. I sent countless messages. He didn't respond to anything. You can't imagine how worried I was. I decided to go to his house after school. "Are you at home? I'm coming over," I wrote. He replied quickly, "Please don't come." I called again. He still didn't pick up. "Eric, what's going on? Will you please talk to me?" I wrote, and this time he gave me a one-word answer, "Tomorrow." I cried all night without stopping. At some point, my eyes dried out. I was just sobbing without tears. Why did Eric start acting like this all of a sudden? Did I piss him off? Was he sick of me? Was he having problems with his family? I thought out of hundreds of reasons, but nothing made sense. He was my soulmate. He wouldn't want to hurt me. He would talk to me no matter what. He'd always explain himself, even if briefly. There must be another reason, and I had to wait until the morning to find out. I didn't sleep all night and came to school with swollen eyes. Eric wasn't there again. This was just too much. After the first class, I angrily packed my stuff. I was going to go to his house no matter what. The moment I stepped out, I saw him. He was just standing there across the street. I ran over to him and hugged him, but he was being very cold to me. "Do you want to sit somewhere?" I asked. He said he wanted to walk. I didn't know what to say. We were walking in silence. Eric finally spoke. "Debbie, I want to break up. Please don't ask me why," he said. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You want to break up? But why?" "You have to give me an explanation," I said, and started crying. "My feelings for you have changed. I don't want to talk about it anymore," he said, and started walking faster. I wanted to say something, but I couldn't talk between my sobs. Suddenly, he started running. I just stood there and looked at him. It all felt like a bad dream, but I knew all too well that it wasn't. Eric didn't come to school that week. I couldn't help myself and called him a few times. He didn't pick up, so I stopped calling. Summer break was starting in a week. I was sure that I wouldn't hear from him. Something unusual must have happened, but for whatever reason, Eric didn't want to involve me in it. I was more hurt than angry, and of course, really surprised. I bought a notebook. I started writing down everything that I couldn't tell Eric. Sometimes I'd write only a paragraph, and sometimes whole pages. It didn't matter how much I wrote because it always ended with, "Why, Eric? Why?" A month had gone by. I was still a mess. I was no longer crying, but I always felt like I was about to cry. I couldn't sleep. Each time I got a message on my phone, I hoped it was from Eric. I tried to distract myself with other things so I wouldn't think about him, but nothing really worked. Each part of my body missed him. My hands wanted to touch him. My lips wanted to kiss him. My head wanted to lean on his shoulder. My ears wanted to hear him. And of course, my eyes wanted to see him. Even if he didn't want me, he still meant everything to me. I came to a point where I couldn't take it anymore. I had to see Eric. I had to see him even from a distance. Once I made up my mind, I couldn't wait till the morning. I put on a hat. I wore my largest sunglasses and thought I had disguised myself. Eric's house was really far from mine. I had to take several buses to get there. I was so excited. My heart was going to explode. There was a cafe right across from his house. We had been there together a bunch of times. I went in and got a table. I locked my sight on his building's entrance and started waiting. Hours went by. So many people came in and out of the building, but there was no sight of Eric or his family. I was so disappointed. I paid the bill and left. I was going to come back the next day. I was crying as I walked to the bus stop. I felt so helpless. Just then my phone started ringing. I was in no shape to speak, so I didn't even look. As I got closer to the bus stop, it started ringing again. This time I looked. Eric! It was Eric! I answered in panic. "Can you walk a little slower? I can't catch up," he said. When I turned around, I saw him. He was wearing a hat and a surgical mask. We went to a park nearby. We found a bench by the trees and sat down. I took his hand and kissed it. He had lost so much weight. I almost cried as I kissed his frail fingers. I was trying really hard not to cry. "You should have told me," I said. "What, that I was going to die?" he replied. Something broke inside me, but I was determined not to cry. "Why are you wearing a hat?" I asked. He took it off angrily. "Because I lost my hair due to chemotherapy." I reached out and touched his bald head. I assumed it was because of the chemo. "But why do you think you'll die even though you're getting treatment?" He smiled. "I could still die," he replied. I kissed his head. I looked him straight in the eyes. "No, you're not going to die," I said. The next day, we went to the hospital together. That day, I learned that chemotherapy medicine is given through the veins. Eric had stomach cancer. The morning of our anniversary, he had heavy bleeding. He was rushed to the hospital. The symptoms were so obvious that they diagnosed him after the first examination. Even though he was devastated, he still came to our pizza date that evening. When he went home that night, he cried a lot. I don't have a right to ruin Debbie's life. She's going to mourn me all her life, he thought. He decided that the best thing to do was to break up with me. He didn't tell me that he was sick because he knew I wouldn't agree. That is exactly the kind of thoughtful thing Eric would do. But I never thought that the reason behind the breakup could be something like this. Eric now gets chemo twice a month. We go to the hospital together. It's not an easy treatment, but it has to be done for him to get better. Eric will get better, I'm sure of it. He'll get better, and when it's our anniversary, we'll...
Hi, everyone. I'm Ezra. Let me introduce you to Eddie. Eddie is my ex-girlfriend. I used to be in love with her, but unfortunately, she let me down. Let me tell you the whole story from the beginning. I started going to my current school last year. Eddie was on the swimming team. The first time I saw her was at an inter-school swimming competition. She was the most beautiful girl on the team. That was the day I found myself falling head over heels for her. Every morning when I woke up, I was telling myself, I will see Eddie again today. I was spending a long time getting ready in front of the mirror. Earlier, I didn't care much about my clothes. But now I was thinking long and hard about what to wear each day. Even though my family is middle class, I have a lot of clothes to choose from. I owe this to my dad's wonderful boss. My dad is a personal driver. His boss, Mr. Kit, had a son who was 2 years older than me. He loved extreme sports. Unfortunately, he had a terrible accident while rock climbing and passed away. Mr. Kit had lost his wife a few years earlier. After losing his only son, in addition to his wife, he became very depressed. At that time, Mr. Kit used to invite me to his house quite often. We used to have these long chats. After he overcame his depression, he said, Ezra, the way you think reminds me so much of my son. I feel as if I'm talking to him. It feels really good to spend time with you. I want to give you a scholarship for your education. After you finish college, you can work for my company. I was really happy to hear this. Mr. Kit went on, saying, I only have one favor to ask of you. Can I send my son's clothes over to your house? I'm going to ask you to wear his clothes when you come to see me. I'd be very happy if you could do that for me. I gladly accepted. That's why I have a lot of clothes. I used to only care about what I was wearing when I was going over to Mr. Kit's house. But now, every morning, I was getting ready for my crush, Eddie. My dad would drop me off at school in the mornings. Then he would pick up Mr. Kit and take him to his office. When my dad noticed I was dressing differently, he started to make fun of me. He'd say, Son, you look like you own this car now. Don't be surprised if I start calling you Mr. Ezra. I would say, Dad, please don't tease me. And he'd say, I'm not kidding. You really do look cool in these clothes. Although I left home every day thinking, I will introduce myself to Eddie today, I couldn't bring myself to do it, and I was starting to lose hope. Finally, my chance came when I was least expecting it. I was eating lunch at the cafeteria. Someone came to my table and asked, Is this seat taken? When I looked up, it was Eddie. She took me by surprise and I said, No, it's totally not taken. Eddie sat down smiling. She held out her hand and said, I'm Eddie. I wanted to say, I know, and I love you and your name too. But of course, I couldn't. I held out my hand and said, I'm Ezra. I couldn't take my eyes off of Eddie during lunch. She was even prettier up close. I was extremely happy now that she was aware of my existence. The next day at lunch, I looked for Eddie, but I couldn't find her. Just as I was leaving the cafeteria to go to class, I heard her voice, Ezra. When I turned to look, she was standing right in front of me. Before I could say anything, she said, I just got back from swimming practice. Come, let's do a TikTok. I didn't know Eddie had a TikTok account. We shot something stupid and uploaded it to both our accounts. Of course, we started following each other too. That night, we texted for hours. When I went to bed, I had to pinch myself really hard because I was so afraid this would turn out to be a dream. If it could hurt this much, I was most definitely not dreaming. I fell asleep, smiling from happiness. In the morning, my dad dropped me off at school again. Just then, I ran into Eddie. I used to walk around the whole school just to catch a glimpse of her, but now she started appearing right in front of me. We walked to the school, chatting. Actually, it was her who was doing the talking because I was so nervous that I couldn't think of anything to say. Eddie and I started meeting during every single break. But I couldn't even imagine that a girl like her could even remotely like someone like me. That's why I kept thinking that she only saw me as a friend. As she told me later, she had actually been waiting for me to ask her out. When she realized that I wasn't going to do it, she decided to do it herself. Of course, that hadn't occurred to me back then. So I was really surprised when one Saturday night she texted me, "Do you want to hang out tonight?" We met at a coffee shop near her house. By the end of the day, we were boyfriend and girlfriend. I was so happy I couldn't sleep that night. I'm not someone who likes to go out in the evenings. As long as I'm in school, I prefer to focus on my studies. It seems like Eddie was my total opposite. On Thursday, she texted me about a restaurant. She wrote, "Want to go to this place for dinner tomorrow? I hear it's very good." I didn't like the idea, but this was a girl that I was in love with. I had to say yes. But there was a problem. The restaurant looked super fancy. I figured it was probably expensive. When I looked at the menu online, I couldn't believe my eyes. It was a lot more expensive than I thought. I would have to save up my allowance for a year to be able to afford a place like that. Eddie didn't really show it, but it seemed that her family was very rich and they were used to going to places like this. The next day at school, Eddie asked, "So, what do you think of the restaurant?" I follow that place on Instagram. It's a celebrity hangout. I said sheepishly, "I don't feel comfortable in such places. Can't we just go to that coffee shop near you?" Eddie was disappointed. "For real? But I really want to go to this place. I've never been to such a chic restaurant. Don't I deserve to go to such places?" she said, staring at me. I was confused. Eddie was saying that normally she wouldn't be able to go to such a place. But at the same time, she thought that I could afford to take her there. So I said, "Babe, I'm embarrassed to say this, but I think eating at such a fancy restaurant would probably cost as much as my dad makes in a month. There's no way I can afford that." Eddie got really mad and yelled, "Ezra, your family is so rich. Why are you lying to me?" When I said, "What makes you think that?" she said, "Because you have a driver that drops you off at school every day. Because your car is worth a fortune. Because you only wear designer clothes. You think I can't tell that your family's really well off?" I said, "My dad works as a driver. The car you saw belongs to his boss. The clothes I'm wearing used to belong to the boss's son. It's actually a really sad story. I'll tell you about it sometime." Eddie began crying and suddenly screamed, "You lied to me." When I said, "Babe, you got it all wrong," she said, "Don't call me babe," and ran away. At that moment, everything became clear to me. Eddie had been thinking I was rich. She became my girlfriend because she thought she could live her dream life with me. I felt really humiliated. The love of my life was a gold digger, and she didn't even feel the need to hide it. For a few days, I was devastated. I was thinking about Eddie every waking moment. But then I figured that this wasn't the right way to go about things. Instead of being sad, I had to draw some lessons. I only fell in love with Eddie because she was beautiful. But as I learned, looks could be deceiving. I felt better when I began to think this way. The heartbreak that kept me up at night went away pretty soon. One day my dad said, "My boss is inviting us to his house. He said he had something important to tell us." We went there that evening. Mr. Kit is a wonderful person. We were having a fantastic time as we always do. Then a man came into the room. Mr. Kit said, "Let me introduce you to my attorney, Mr. Turner. He's with us today for a very important matter." The attorney took out a document and began reading. We couldn't believe our ears. My mom couldn't keep herself from crying. The document was Mr. Kit's will. Because he didn't have any other relatives, he had decided to leave half of his fortune to charity and the remaining half to me. I became incredibly rich overnight. Mr. Kit said, "This is the best decision I made in my life. Yes, I lost my son, but now I have an honorary son," and gave me a hug. I was going to receive the inheritance in the future, but Mr. Kit wanted us to have better lives right away. We moved into his house. I started going to a private school. Now I was really living the life Eddie was dreaming about. She had no idea about any of this because we had stopped talking. One day, Mr. Kit called me into his office. He said, "My company sponsored a competition. I'm supposed to present the medals to the winners, but I'm sure they're all young people like yourself. Would you like to go on my behalf?" I was really excited. Half an hour later, my dad and I were at the venue. You guessed it, right? It was a swimming competition, and Eddie was most probably there. The award ceremony had begun as I entered the hall. The presenter said, "Our sponsor is going to present the medals to the winners." I quickly walked towards them. Right next to the presenter was the podium with the top 3 finishers. When I saw that Eddie was one of them, my knees started to shake. It turned out she got second place. She was clearly surprised to see me. First, I presented the gold medal to the winner. Then I stood in front of Eddie. I smiled as I hung the silver medal around her neck. "Congratulations," I said. Eddie didn't say anything because she was completely stunned. That night, I got the message I'd been waiting for. "Hey, what's up?" I didn't write back because I didn't know how to respond. After a while, Eddie wrote, "I always knew you were lying to me." That made me upset. I replied, "I never told you a single lie in my life. I really wasn't rich back when we were dating, but then something surprising happened." Eddie wrote back, "I don't understand any of this, but I don't want to make a big deal out of it. I missed you so much. I'm sure you missed me too." Of course, I didn't reply. She must have gotten the message because she never tried to get in touch with me after that. Thanks for listening to me. If you liked my story, please don't forget to like the video. See you!